Hello again, boys and girls. Me again. Xianyun got leaked quite a while ago, but I will cover her now. Rather late than ever, right? So let's get into her base kit first, shall we? Xianyun is an Animo Catalyst character with an attack percent ascension stat. Rip to anyone who thought she'd be polearm. Anyways, her normal attack are just that. Normal. Yeah, who would have thought? But because she's an Animo Catalyst character, she can drive swirl-based teams much like Sucrose can. Taser specifically is the best example of this, and while it is something worth mentioning, Taser teams are not exactly the best place to use her. Now we get to her skill, which is quite unique. Xianyun will jump up, and you can jump up to 2 more times. When you plunge, you will fly down and do a special plunging attack. You should already get a clue as to what her gimmick is now. This generates 3 particles normally, and 5 if you do all 3 jumps. That's a lot of particles, but trust me, you're gonna need them. She takes a lot of time to use this skill, which is one of the biggest flaws in her kit. And that means her field time is unnaturally high compared to other supports. At least her burst animation is pretty quick. Speaking of which, there's her burst. This will heal the entire team based on Xianyun's attack, and then also continuously heal the team as well. Basically a better G-Note. But wait! It's not over. Your team will get 8 funny stacks, and guess what they do? They let you jump higher? What? This makes sense, let me explain. These higher jumps allow you to, wait for it, plunge attack. Yeah, that's pretty neat, but how is it practical? Well, I'm glad you asked. For that we have her Ascension passives. Her Ascension 1, her special plunging attack after using her E 3 times, it will create a vortex. This is actually a really good vortex, and it's a big reason as to why I think she is good. It has the same pull strength as Kazuha's held E, while only having a little bit less range. This makes her a lot better than Jean, as instead of having anti-CC, she has actual CC. And then there's her Ascension 4. This will give the character, when they plunge, a flat damage buff based on Xianyun's attack if you're using one of her funny stacks. This actually gives a lot of damage, since Xianyun will get a lot of attack from artifacts, her Ascension stat, and her high base attack, as well as weapons. This can easily double a character's plunging attack, and makes her viable even with non-plunge DPS characters. This straight up turns Xiao into a monster, and even makes her work with someone like Navia. Benna will still be better, but Xianyun works, which is what matters here. Next up, her Constellations. Xianyun's C1 will give her an extra E-charge. Nothing new, we've seen this before. And this will cut her energy recharge requirements by a massive amount. But there's a slight issue. Her E takes 5 fucking years to do, therefore I don't see this constellation being super good. Her C2 is just insane. She gets 20% attack for doing her special plunge, and then the Ascension 4 buff nearly doubles. Comparing C0 and C2 Xianyun, it will turn Navia's plunge attack from 95k to 138k. Reminded that Xianyun wasn't even made for Navia at all, this C2 just turns plunges into nuclear warheads. I can't say it's the most busted C2, since units like Farina still exist, but it still turns Xianyun herself into a way better character. C4 will give the entire team healing when Xianyun does her special plunge attack, and this is nearly useless. Xianyun already has a lot of healing, and certainly didn't need more. This healing is very good for stacking Farina, which I do acknowledge, but it's just so unneeded. C6 turns Xianyun into a main DPS. We've seen this happen a lot with off-field characters, where they turn them into a straight-up carry unit at C6, and this one is no different. But the damage you get from it isn't as stellar as a C6 Yelan or C6 Farina. It requires full field time unlike those two. You still can get a lot of damage out of it though. Definitely not the greatest C6, but if you really like Xianyun and are willing to spend the money, it's not awful. Now let's get into something else that we need to discuss when we discuss a new 5-star character, their signature weapon. This one is a very big attack stick, having the highest base attack in the game along with Broken Pines and Calamity Queller. It also, like Calamity Queller, has an attack percent stat. It differs in passives though. It will give the team 28% plunging damage bonus when Xianyun plunges, and when a teammate plunges, it gives Xianyun energy. It's a good weapon, but naturally for a support, I'd skip the weapon and go with something else. Speaking of support, why don't you support my channel by liking and subscribing? Leave a comment as well. And now we go into the detailed information. Like I mentioned before, Xianyun's E will give her 3 or 5 particles. Because of this, I recommend always doing the full E, because otherwise you will run into energy problems in most teams. As a single Anemo assuming no Favonius weapons, her ER requirements can easily skyrocket to over 250. So yeah! Fav, Signature, or Oathsworn Eye. Those are basically the only options when you go single Anemo. When it comes to sets, it will be Viridescent Venerare in any team where it boosts the majority of the damage, and Song of Days Past or Noblesse everywhere else. Because all of Xianyun's healing is team-wide, she's perhaps the best song user. She can abuse it quite well. When it comes to the best characters to use her with, the selection is quite varied. First of all, Xiao and Gaming. Both of these characters are primarily plunging attack characters, and Xianyun's buff will thus be massive for them. Most of their kit is already focused on plunging, so the flat damage buff helps a lot. Next we have Diluc, a character who has one of the highest plunging attack multipliers in the game. There's a reason the Dragon Strike technique was primarily used with him. With a C6 Bennett, you don't even need to burst her skill, so that's convenient as hell. Next up, I'm gonna mention Neuvillette. A lot of players are already using Jean with him, and Xianyun is just a better Jean. The plunging buffs are useless on him, but at least she has CC as opposed to Jean. There's also Ayaka. Ayaka isn't using Farina yet, because there's no room for a healer. Until now. Xianyun has near Kazuha levels of grouping, which means that you don't lose a massive amount of CC. Farina's buff will make up for losing Kazuha's, as well as her personal damage. Raiden Double Hydro is the last team that I want to mention. It was already using Jean, but now with Xianyun, you have actual grouping while losing literally nothing. The plunge buff will not be used just like Neuvillette, but it's still an upgrade over Jean. Other characters that can use Xianyun are Navia, Fremine, Child, Ganyu, and Hu Tao. Navia and Fremine being able to plunge gives them a bunch more damage, and Ganyu, Child, Hu Tao just see Xianyun as a VV holder with CC and healing. She's ultimately just a better Jean with a goofy plunging buff, but this does mean she is just as reliant on Farina as Jean is. Healers are good because Farina is good, and with every healer, you have to consider how good they are with Farina, and she works very well with her. I personally won't pull for her, as my favorite teams don't actually use her, and those that do, use her purely as a Jean upgrade. This doesn't mean I believe she's bad though. I do expect a nerf to her A4, as plunging attacks simply aren't balanced around being easily available. That means that buffing them even more makes them a bit unbalanced. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, as well as leaving a comment down below. But that's going to be all from me. Peace.